Good afternoon. Welcome to the weekly livestock market update. I'm Brownfield anchor reporter Megan Grubner. With us, as always, to talk all things markets, University of Missouri, Scott Brown. Good afternoon, Scott.
Good afternoon, Megan.
All right. A couple of reports for us to get into today. We'll talk a little demand. We'll talk a little supply. But to kick things off, let's recap what happened this week in the markets.
Yeah, on the cattle side this week, cash cattle were $2.50 lower on the week. Those feeder cattle markets were anywhere from $1 to $3 lower this week. On the futures side, we got strength this week with the April live cattle futures contract up $1.60 and the April feeder contract up 30 cents. We got 11 cent higher corn prices, corn futures this week out of the report. On the beef side, choice box beef prices were $2 lower this week. On the hog side of the equation, $1 higher cash barrel and goat prices this week. And the April lean hog futures contract was up $2.40. Pork cutout value lost $2.55 this week, primarily due to lower belly prices.
Scott, as we take a look at, I want to talk specifically about the rising corn price, and we have all of this kind of global disturbance. How does this set things up for, we typically talk about risk management in terms of cattle production, but I think we almost have to think about it in terms of cattle production as well as corn and soybean production in the U.S., knowing that we're taking a look at challenges getting inputs. There's a disturbance. I talked to a Ukrainian farmer earlier this week who said they're short 200,000 tons of diesel fuel. So how does that all shake up in terms of volatility in all aspects of the market, but also some risk management conversations as well?
Yeah, so this gets really hard to talk about risk management with all the volatility. I mean, it's ultra volatile. I don't know how to describe it. It's out of control volatile. You name the adjective, and I think we could say yes to it. I guess for me, the important part is I don't want to lock in one piece of the equation and leave the others open. And I say that I might not want to lock in cattle prices and leave feed costs open. That might get me in a very tough margin situation. And I mean margin, not futures margin, but return margin. So I want to think carefully about locking in the both output and input sides of this equation with what we see today. That may be the best advice I can offer, although it may come up short of what folks want in terms of help in this tough situation that we're in.
Nobody's crystal ball is very shiny right now.
Yeah, I think it's worse than cracked, actually, in trying to look ahead. So.
All right, Scott, let's talk retail prices as we take a look at February of this year. They're a little shocking when you take a look at those numbers.
Yes. All right. So we're doing nothing but pushing higher prices at consumers. And yes, we got out this week the CPI and overall CPI increase that we haven't seen for 40 years. So we're certainly seeing higher across the board prices. In terms of beef and pork, we're talking about February beef retail prices that are 19% above year-ago levels, pork retail prices that are 15% above year-ago levels. So still fairly high, I will say. Relative to January of 22, though, we're talking about prices roughly unchanged. When you get into some of the components here, your favorite, of course, sliced bacon, up 23% relative to a year ago. So a lot of things at play here, I will say. It shows that the products consumers are most wanting are the ones that are tending to move up the most, given what we see today.
And we're not seeing necessarily a massive reduction in demand, but when we take a look at that considered, as we look ahead to consumer sentiment, I would think that these rising prices might have a little, could they potentially be met with a little more headway because of a decline in consumer sentiment, and especially when you look at that year over year level?
Yeah, so for sure. And I this is where I say overall inflation higher fuel prices, I think all kind of translate into what frankly is not a good consumer sentiment report that we got out this week. The overall index, down nearly 5% month over month, and down nearly 30% year over year, Megan. That got my attention. And I will say now, all of a sudden, I think it's harder for consumers because I've got all these inputs going up, and maybe wages, although moving higher, aren't keeping up any longer. So I start having to make much tougher decisions. But that March report of consumer sentiment, certainly we need to be watching as we go forward to see if this negative drag continues.
All right, let's talk supply and demand numbers from USDA as we take a look at those. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so we, didn't get so we got changes out of USDA for the 2022 estimates on the livestock side. I will say the positive news, what were fed steer prices for 2022 average increased $2 in March relative to February, $6 higher hog prices in the March projections relative to a month ago, $3.50 higher chicken prices. So higher output prices is what USDA is suggesting at this point. Yes, they did raise corn prices 20 cents a bushel and soybean meal $10 a ton, so some higher costs as well. But price side's all good. I guess I look at this and a couple of things that stick out to me. So net exports of beef, pork, and chicken, so all three added together. USDA is now projecting down nearly 800 million pounds relative to 2021 for this year. That should get our attention after we've been talking about growing exports of meat generally out of the United States. USDA did this month increase beef production for 2022 by nearly 200 million pounds, but at the same time decrease chicken production by 250 million pounds. So net of all those meats wasn't a big change on the production side. So not a lot of new news here, but higher prices, I guess, for livestock products is probably the biggest piece out of that report.
It looks like we get to end the week and end our talk today on a fairly positive note. Monthly trade data came out this week, and man, those beef exports continue to make some waves.
Yeah, so we can describe the beef export numbers with one word: China. In terms of what we got, so 288 million pounds of total beef exports in January. That's 17% higher. We saw 48 million pounds of beef go to China in January. That's more than double a year ago where we were at with them, and it accounts for more than 60% of the overall increase that we saw. So our boat's definitely tied to China as we think about beef exports. It's nice to see some strength out of the gate here in those monthly beef export numbers. Now, beef imports were also higher this month. A little bit of an anomaly as we had some Brazilian product that I think came into the United States, but because of quota limitations, actually didn't get into commerce until here in January, pushed up beef imports a lot. So I don't expect that trend to continue. The other side of the equation here a little bit is pork. Pork exports, down nearly 1 million pounds relative to where they were a year ago. And again, that's all due to, and we can describe in one word, China. As the Chinese want less pork as they're rebuilding their herds. That number got my attention for sure in terms of more concern on the pork front of the equation if you think about export trade.
When we think about this conversation, I've been with corn and soybean growers all week at Commodity Classic here in New Orleans. We talk about diversification of markets, and I know that the U.S. Meat Export Federation does a fantastic job of finding new markets and getting our product there. Seeing how much China is playing a role in not just the pork side, but now the beef side, how critical is it for us in terms of risk management to make sure that market diversification and trade diversification continues?
Yeah, so for sure. And I'll stop for a minute and remind us that markets like Japan and Korea are bigger markets than even where China is today, but the growth hasn't been there. When you look at overall global beef imports over the last 4 or 5 years, really, so some small growth in places like Japan and South Korea, but 3.5 to 4.5 million metric ton growth, all due to China. So we weren't getting some of that growth. That was Brazil and other countries. But I just, when you look at the graph of total beef imports, it is shocking how much China accounts for that. So to your point, I always say diversification is a great risk management strategy to global trade. We know what happens from the soybean example of depending on one country too much. So the Chinese put tariffs on our soybeans back in 2018. It certainly hurt our ability to trade in soybeans. We need to make sure that we try to avoid that as best we can in terms of beef and pork. And so I will sometimes say to producers, those checkoff dollars being spent to develop other global markets is a great risk management tool long term to avoid this. I depend on just a few countries that can hurt me if they decide not to trade with the U.S. any longer.
Scott, that'll do it for us this week. No reports next week. Whatever will we talk about?
I bet we can find a thing or two still to talk about next week. Just given how uncertain markets have been, I'm always amazed at what's the next thing that comes along in the news cycle these days. Just given all the situation that we have going in the world today.
How much snow do you have?
So 2 hours, right? We can talk forever. Is that the point here? We can go forever.
No, but I am curious. Do you have snow?
Snow, yes. Sorry. Like I said, how much time do I have?
Oh no, snow. No, I don't have time.
Yes,
I have oysters to eat.
we got 4 or 5 inches in Columbia. You know, it's already pretty heavy wet snow already starting to melt, and Sunday's supposed to be warm and 60, so we'll probably get rid of it pretty quickly, and maybe you and I can be on the golf course early next week.
No, you don't want to golf with me. I promise you that. That would be horrible. On a boat, maybe.
Okay, all right. We can go to the Lake of the Ozarks and go fishing then.
Okay, that's much more my speed. Scott, it's great to see you. Look forward to seeing you again next week. Have a great weekend.
You do the same, Megan.
To have our weekly livestock market update delivered to your email box every Saturday morning, go to brownfieldagnews.com. You can also submit questions and comments there as well. And if you'd like to check out some of the great Brownfield podcasts, go to brownfieldagnews.com/podcast. And one more thing before I let you go, I'm wagging my mom finger. Sorry about that. If you haven't checked out the weekly commodity market update with Ben Brown, not Scott's brother, and Will Robinson on Tuesdays, you should definitely do that too. That's all I have for today. Scott, have a great weekend.
You too, Megan.
I'm Megan Grepner for Brownfield.